Okay. Hello, Packers fans, and welcome into PackersNews.com. Apologies for the technical difficulties right there at the beginning. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined by Pete Dougherty. We are here at Lambeau Field. We are about an hour and a half from kickoff, Packers versus Rams. Pete, in the succinct little sentence, tell us how important this game is in terms of playoff picture.
Big. Two teams going for the top seed. They're both, game and a half out. And if they both end up tying for a spot, whether it's for the top seed or a lower seed, the winner would get the spot. So a lot as far as seeding is on the line. I mean, pretty good bet, pretty great bet. Both will be in the playoffs, but they're fighting for home field advantage and all that stuff.
And then Packers did announce inactives here just a minute ago. Why don't you go ahead and run through those?
Yeah, David Bakhtiari, Kevin King, Vernon Scott, Malik Taylor, and Jack Heflin. So that means, amongst others, Aaron Jones is up.
Which we knew was going to be almost a 50-50 shot. He practiced all week. We saw him. Sorry, it's a little windy out here.
It is like
I know. We saw him running routes at practice. More importantly, we saw him cutting when it comes. By the time we got to Thursday, we saw him making cuts. We saw him sort of jumping around and putting pressure on that knee. That seemed to be the most important thing, right?
Yeah, and you say we, but actually it was you. I was not there. But
Packers News.
Yes, I knew that's what you meant. But yeah, and I really wondered whether they would just take the extra cautious route, and because they don't play next week with the bye, sit him this week also, and then he'd be really good to go. But they must feel pretty good about how much healing he's done in the last 2 weeks, and whatever sprain there was to that MCL must not have been very severe.
And as we said, this game could be very important to the playoff picture. And the Rams have shown they're susceptible to the run. So do you think that made any sort of difference of knowing that could be possibly your most important playmaker in this particular game?
I would think. Now, you don't know what they're really thinking. They don't tell you. I would think the overriding issue would be how healthy he is, and that they would just have to. If the risk is a little too great, no matter what the game plan is, no matter how important the run is, you don't sacrifice risking not having this guy in January for a game in late November. So I would still think that would be the overriding factor, and I wonder, I'm guessing he'll have a pitch count for snaps and touches.
Yeah, what would you say that pitch count would be?
Yeah, good question. Maybe 30% of the snaps, something like that. That would be I'm just guessing. It could be higher, but I would guess somewhere in that range.
Mohamed made a good point. He said that also means Allen Lazard is active.
It does. And amongst the things he can do is he's kind of a quasi tight end. I mean, he's basically 6'5". He's a good blocker. He's 220 pounds. I see some friends of mine who I don't like to see anywhere. But hello, gentlemen. We're on the air.
Are they making faces at you over here?
They are.
They're trying to distract you. He's a professional. He can't be distracted.
It's one of my college roommates.
Oh, how nice. We'll get some stories from you about Pete in a little bit.
Go away.
Where were we? Allen Lazard.
Yes. So anyway, he can play that quasi tight end role, and he's a good blocker. They can line him up as not in the tight end spot, but as a kind of a slot receiver, really tight to the line. So he's one of the guys, and he's a big target over the middle. So he's one of the guys who can help at least mitigate the loss of Robert Tonyan. They can't replace the guy, but they can, when they're looking to minimize the pain they feel. Lazard's one of the guys that can help them do that.
Levi asked if we see Sully lined up against Cooper Kupp out of the slot.
If he's the slot guy, yeah, they don't move around the slot guys. They just put one guy in there, so he would be the guy. And that's a huge matchup. Really good receiver. I think he's leading the league, right? And is it catches and yards or at least yards? Kupp, yeah. I mean, he's having a huge season. Really crafty guy. So that would be a really big matchup. At least size-wise, this is a guy who would not overwhelm Sullivan. Kupp's not a very big guy.
And then on the opposite side of that, you have Davante Adams, who's not too far down from Cooper Kupp in terms of what he's doing production-wise. Rams play a lot of zone. How do you see Matt LaFleur sort of taking advantage of that with Davante Adams?
Interesting matchup because they both run the same offense and they run the same defense. So they're familiar with the schemes. Now the personnel's different, so that has a huge effect on the way that they implement the scheme. but they know what they're going against here. And Joe Barry was on the Rams staff for the last few years, the Packers defense coordinator, so he actually can give them a lot of insight on the Rams defensive personnel. I always thought that in the 90s when the Packers were making their rise and they beat San Francisco in the playoffs a couple times, I thought something that really always helped them was Mike Holmgren had come from the 49ers, and he knew their personnel and what they liked and what bothered those guys, and I think that helped Fritz Shermer quite a bit. The same could be in play here for the Packers, and Matt LaFleur from what he learns from Joe Barry.
Yeah, and Joe Barry talked about that this week. He was like, I know all of those guys. I've spent the past 4 years with them, went to the Super Bowl with them. The only guy he said he didn't really know was Matthew Stafford, which is one of the more important ones. But luckily for this defense, they are familiar with Matthew Stafford. Do you see, I guess the question is, what do you see as sort of the marriage in this Rams offense between Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford, and how much can the Packers take advantage of what they do know?
Yeah, Stafford gives them, he can make any throw. He's just got a really strong arm. He can make throws that Goff couldn't. He brings a lot of toughness to their team. I mean, that's a guy who took a brutal beating in Detroit, but he always got back up, always answered the bell. So I think he helps their toughness. But as you said, the Packers are pretty familiar with him. They played him twice a year for, how many years now? Yeah.
And then one more just on the inactives list. Rashawn Gary was not on there, correct? So that means he would be out there today.
He's up also. I wonder if he'll be facing any kind of pitch count too. They face the same issues about weighing how big this game is against making sure this guy is still feeling good when January hits, and they had the bye next weekend. So that would have been an extra week. But the fact, we talked about this last week, the fact that he was even on the practice field last week, even though he didn't play, was a pretty good sign that he had at least a chance to play this week, and obviously turned out to be a good chance.
We'll see if he comes out in like some sort of Thanos glove. And then last question here, which we kind of addressed, but we'll just go into more detail. Will Matt LaFleur feed the backs and control the clock? That's how San Francisco beat this team.
It is. They ran it right down their throat, and you wonder, or you would think, if LaFleur has learned a lesson in the last few games. Look at last week's game. First half, a lot of shotgun, a lot of passing. Second half, more running, more under center. It was two different teams, right? Now, part of it was Aaron Rodgers probably getting some of the rust off, but part of it was to get the most out of it, it's kind of paradoxical, but to get the most out of the Rodgers, they got to run the ball more, because that protects, that slows down the rush and helps him quite a bit. So, I would think that'll be a big part of their game plan, I would think.
Yeah. Well, we will be there to cover it for you all. If you missed it, Aaron Jones active today, Rashawn Gary active today, Alan Lazard active today. They're going to need them all to beat this Rams team. And Matt LaFleur got his wish. It is windy and it is cold at Lambeau Field. Stay tuned.